Curious, because I work on a lot of mandolins and I don't know what the hell I'm doing. So
You work on a lot of mandolins there in New York City?
I do. I'm like in some kind of weird like mandolin clique in New York City and they're all like, they're mostly elderly people who belong to the.
So after today, you're going to be able to pretend. You're going to be able to stop pretending that they're archtop guitars that somebody left in the dryer for too long.
Yeah, essentially, I'm going to have to call them all and do that sort of a product recall. No. No, it's a lot of old studio guys who like now play in these like mandolin groups.
There are a few Hansen mandolins floating around New York City. I happen to know that for a fact, so just watch out for that.
Oh, nice. Okay. No, I get a lot of Gibsons, and do you know Lawrence Smart?
I've seen a few of his instruments.
Yeah, well, a lot of his.
There's a lot of smarts in New York City. That's crazy. He's like a Seattle is here, right?
Or Idaho, I think.
Idaho? Oh.
Might be Idaho. Yeah.
I thought he was a Seattle guy.
Yeah, I know of 4 that I work on at least.
He's the guy that gave up on he builds F5s, but he's like, he does kind of a scroll on the body, but paddle heads the headstock, I think.
Yeah, I think so.
Now, if you get one of those Hansens in there, you just be sure and tell them that whatever you do will avoid the warranty on it.
Oh, well, I mean, you know.
All right, phone is on silent mode. So what is the mandolin on your bench, Hugh?
This is old Peanut here.
Peanut?
That's the name that Aubrey Haney gave this mandolin. Peanut.
Is that because of the color? Did somebody?
Yeah.
Are my eyes
the color and the shape. It's
Did somebody apply a brown to that? Is that what's going on?
No, it's just it's a Gibson A9 from the early 2000s. It's one that has happened to fall into my possession here.
That's got us on triple cam. Well, all right, should we get going?
All righty.
Okay, everybody. Welcome Hugh Hansen. He is going to run us down some information on setting up mandolins. I have it in my head. We got a lot of repair guys on here and gals that are probably mostly guitar focused, but as you all know, we wind up running into banjos and zithers and auto harps and occasionally a mandolin. And so let's get the inside dirt from here. Hugh, where did you want to start out on this?
Well, I'll just tell you where I'm coming from here. During my time at Groom Guitars, I appointed myself the head of their mandolin division. And since I left there, it's been about 12, 13 years ago. I build mandolins and I do warranty work for Gilchrist mandolins. So I see a lot of them. I do a lot of them, and they can be pretty tricky to set up. There's a lot of things that are kind of unique to mandolins that you don't really run into so much on guitar, and so there's I was gonna go through this instrument here, and I've got another one handy that I can show a few things on, and hopefully it's useful. If anybody has any questions, feel free to jump in. I'm going to be actually doing the setup here, so there will be plenty of parts of this that are going to be like watching paint dry, and so And worse than that, I'll just go ahead and apologize now for any notes that you hear coming out of this. I get paid to fix them, not play them. So,
Do you,
all right.
Before we start, are there any things that you might look at a mandolin and go, this is a non-starter for setup? Like if you got a slam bridge or something like that. Anything like that?
Sure. There's one of the first things that I'm looking at is I'm looking at it from the side, and I want to see. I don't know if everybody can see this here. I want to see the apex of this arch be right, basically at where the bridge is. A lot of times, you'll look at them and you see that the apex is back maybe an inch or even further behind the bridge. I can just about guarantee that it didn't start out that way. So as the under tension, especially if it's weak in this area right here, you got the tension of the neck block that is kind of turning back into it. It's being compressed this way from the tailpiece. So all of that is kind of, you've got your arch here. As it's getting pushed in this way, it can kind of give in front of the neck block there, and it pushes the peak of the arch back further. When instruments get made too light from the beginning, a lot of people really like the sound of instruments. They sound big, they sound fat, they sound fluffy, they have a fast response, they have a big warm bass to them, but that's really the sign of an instrument that's in quite a bit of distress when you're seeing that. You can also see like when the center seam pops underneath the tailpiece. If you're seeing that, that's also a sign of stress. Sometimes it gets really sinky in that area. It doesn't mean that you can't set it up, but I kind of usually let people know that they should be keeping an eye on it. Sometimes you see them in a really severe state of distress to where they're almost like concave in that area in between the bridge and the end of the fretboard. So that if it's something that's just going to be hopelessly unstable, then obviously you kind of let people know that to begin with. There's certain manufacturers that are worse than others in that regard. Another big one is, Gibson truss rods can really cause a problem for you. I've gotten to the point where Gibsons that were made in the last 20 years or so, they're kind of iffy. They can be okay, but they like a normal mandolin truss rod has got kind of a reverse camber to it. Somewhere along the way, somebody came up with an idea that it would be easier to get access to the truss rod nut if you just took that truss rod and put a little bend in it upward at the end. And so as you take off that truss rod cover, sometimes if you're seeing the truss rod nut coming up at an angle like this, that's because the truss rod has been bent up like that. And so when you go and you tighten that truss rod, all you get is an exaggerated version of that S curve that's been bent into the truss rod. And so you can chase those around and around and around and around, and you'll never catch your tail on them because they just don't work.
So that's a non-functioning truss rod usually when you see that.
Yeah. So like if someone is dropping one of those off, and I really can't think of any other way to get out of it, and I'm actually going to work on it. I will while they're there, I like to take that truss rod cover off and just start working that rod a little bit and see if it's working or not. And sometimes miraculously they still work. Other times they really only work from like the third fret backwards, towards the nut. And sometimes they'll back bow it from there, but then induce more bow in the remainder of it.
So everybody, if you're getting if you're getting an instrument from that era, you just do a pre-inspection on the truss rod then, is what you're saying.
Yes, that's wise, and just so that no one thinks, that it was fine when they dropped it off, and then well, you're telling me that the truss rod's all messed up, so on and so forth.
So what do you do if you got one that's just borderline, or not borderline, just non-functioning? Do you just hand it back, or are you like, hey, we should put a new truss rod in this?
If you're smart, you'll do that. Sometimes sometimes the only way to deal with that is to refret it. Basically, is to level the board out and refret it as though it has no truss rod, and kind of use the same compression fretting techniques and stuff like you would use on a Martin or something like that. And so sometimes if there's very little that's required of the rod, it can still kind of work. Sometimes you get ones where the neck is pretty weak, and if there's a lot being asked of that truss rod, it doesn't tend to go very well.
Cool. Should we talk a little bit about what you want to see in a relief profile first, or do you want to get to that kind of organically?
Well, yes, not much. A mandolin neck does not need a lot of relief. It cannot have a lot of relief, especially like if you're playing in closed positions up around the the 5th, 7th fret, where a lot of bluegrass notes happen up there. That too much bow in there is your notes will really start to splat out up there. So I'm kind of thinking usually maybe 3 to 5 thousandths is a good number to think for that. It can vary based on the player, but that's pretty good. Mm-hmm. Generally there's some people that really do like and need high mandolin action, but those are definitely in the minority, even in Nashville.
Even in Nashville,
most people want it as low as you can get it without buzzing.
So everybody's smiling. We all hear that all the time. So what about like on guitars? Some people like fall away. Is fall away ever appropriate in a mandolin fingerboard extension, or?
Yeah, a little bit of it is pretty handy. It just depends on how much it is moving under string tension. Like if you're if it's pretty straight, and then you've got a substantial amount of kick up at the end, like that's kind of telling you that the neck angle is changing under tension. So that's usually a sign that it's pretty weak in that area, or that it's that the ribs are really thin, or that the back is weak, or that there's something wrong with the button, or there's something wrong with the neck joint. But generally, yeah, a small amount of fall away is nice to have if you can get it, because they do tend to move a little bit. But
Doug wanted to back us up and talk about body deflection. Can we take a second and rewind back to body?
I didn't want to interrupt where you were going, but I wanted to come back to your comments about the peak of the arch on the face. Two things. One, I presume you're obviously always checking inside to see if you've got the wings of the brace popping that would cause the top to sink somewhat. I presume that's a foregone conclusion. But the question I had is that when you have a circumstance where the peak is other than where you'd like it, making it for less than an optimum instrument to set up, are there a series of repairs you would recommend to a customer before it's set upable, or is that you're just dealing with an instrument that's got growth pains or issues?
Yeah, you're just dealing with an instrument that's unstable, and so it's like it's worthwhile to mention, because if it's really you kind of have to be careful. They have problems staying in tune. Sometimes the bridge has a problem staying upright, perpendicular to the plane of the top. Sometimes they're so unstable that you can do your job correctly, and the instrument is still it won't stay in one place. And so it's good for people to know that at the beginning, so they know what's going on, and also so that you don't get blamed for it.
managing those expectations.
But
And like
as
a lot
far
of,
as far as as far as what you're asking about the brace though, like most F-hold mandolins are going to be either tone bar or X brace, and it's happened, but it's super rare for any of those to come loose. On a lateral brace, like on a oval hole Gibson from the teens, it's pretty much safe to assume that that brace is loose until proven otherwise. So even then, but yeah, those tone bars don't come loose very often, and a lot of times, like the ends of them will even be slightly tucked underneath the neck block and or the rim. So those are pretty rare to come loose. Like it's almost always a matter of that the top is just too weak that happens.
The remedy for that is there anything to do other than a new top, or is it just?
Well, you can get yourself on the Hansen mandolins wait list. We're currently projecting somewhere out to like about 2027.
Oh, that's good. That's good. That's good wait time. Sign me up. I could wait that long.
Okay. But it's a trade. Like some people like are just like a moth to a flame with instruments like that because they like the sound. Like if you hear someone say that they like a guitar sound out of a mandolin, like that's there's a sound that's associated with that, and it's sort of like the same sound profile that you get like with a refinished top on a flat top guitar. You know, like they have like that big warm fat response, but they tend to get mushy and they don't have much definition, especially as you play up the neck. And some people really like that sound, and you know, and like I said, like there's been it's kind of a natural tendency. Like you don't, like when you're building, you don't want to build them any heavier than you need to, but you don't want to build them any lighter. But there's certainly people that go for like that maximum initial impact, so that if an instrument is sitting on a wall with a bunch of other mandolins, somebody will pull it down and play it and go, "Dadgum, that's the loudest one on the whole wall."
Yeah.
And they want that one, and they don't realize. I mean, like if I'm churning out a batch of new ones, like if one of them sounds like too good right out from the start, like I'd probably worry about that a little bit. I worry about that more than I would about one that is like seems a little doggy, like at the beginning.
Yeah. Do you ever play, like if you get a dog, do you play it until it undogs, or do you
try
send it out as is? Yeah. Is
well,
anybody doing?
You know, it's hard to tell. It's hard to tell how they wind up, like how they start out. Sometimes they start out sounding good and they just keep sounding good. Sometimes they can really surprise you in terms of like when you first string them up, there's like a few minutes, like just like the first few chords and stuff you play on them, like they sound amazing. And then they just kind of shrink back, and then they sound all confused and disoriented. And then it takes them a while to make sense out of what they are. And it matters a lot to who plays them and how they play them and how much they play them. Like I see people that buy instruments and they bring them in and I play them and I think that's okay. And then they take them home and they play them for 5 hours a day for a year, and they bring it back and you would not think it was the same instrument. They can really change and grow. And some people have a special ability just to take something and just absolutely put a sleeper hold on it. Like they can just take an instrument and just make it clam up. But
so
generally the better quality the instrument is, the more temperamental they are in that regard.
How receptive are your customers to hearing that they're picking instruments based on criteria that might not produce a forever instrument for them? You know, like are people receptive to that information?
Most people cannot accept that right away.
Yeah. Is anybody building
and they like what they like, but like, you know, like the fifth time you bring me an instrument and I tell you that the top is collapsing, like you can't be that surprised. Like they're just, some people have a type that they go for, and That's and it's like there's some really good players that fall into that category. And if you accept that part of the bargain, then that is hey, that's more power to you. But they have to realize like you can't have there's no something for nothing in physics, and you can't necessarily get that sound without some of the inherent problems of instability that go along with it.
I had heard, I'm not in the world, but I had heard flamenco guitars are built to be disposable and be very, very loud and very toneful, like at the front end, and then just to get played out. Is anybody building mandolins with that kind of just up front being very like this thing is not going to be a forever item, but here you go, this thing's going to sound great right out of the box?
Not intentionally. I've never seen someone take that approach intentionally, but no, it's funny. Like I've seen a heck of a lot of lures, and I've never seen one with the top that was collapsing in that way. And they're 100 years old now. We just we missed yesterday was July 9th for any of the true mandolin nerds out there. That's a big label signing date. Bill Monroe's mandolin, July 9, 1923. So that's pretty, they persevere for the same reasons that the violins do, which is that they have opposing forces that are canceling each other out. And when everything is in balance, they can last for a very long time, a lot longer than a flat top guitar will. So, I've never seen one that had that problem unless there was like something else that was like pretty obvious, like whether like if it had been like refinished and the top was thinner than it should be, or whether somebody's foot went through it or stuff like that. Like just left to their own devices, they're very stable.
Cool. All right, should we get on to filing some?
Yeah, I'm just going to start. This poor thing has been languishing up in my daughter's room. It's been subjected to Copperhead Road and probably losing my religion at some point. So.
Oh my God.
We'll do our best here. So.
Ted, I think we can go to just the phone cam.
Probably can't. It's going to be really hard to see that, but this truss rod nut is ever so slightly bent up, but just a little bit. It's still pretty functional. Sometimes you see them that are bent. They're bent so far up that you can't even get the truss rod cover down flat. They're pushing the truss rod cover up. They're bent so much.
Is that a custom built peg winder there?
It sure is. Regular peg winders don't tend to work very good with mandolins, especially with pearl buttons. I'll take that bridge off. You can mark where it is with tape if you want to, but usually it's pretty obvious where they go. It can be helpful though if you're wanting to keep the action kind of where you found it, to measure that. Measure the bridge right there on the G and the E strings, and then note that. Usually just write it on there. Pencil. Actually, let me show you. So one of the first things that you'll do is to, especially if it's an F5 or if it's got a pick guard, is to remove that pick guard. And those can be a little bit tricky to get off. So I'll get a different mandolin here and show you how to do that.
What kind of mandolin is this, Hugh?
That one, that's a Hansen there.
Uh,
Let's see. And by the way, like on mandolins, you're dealing with a lot of flathead screws. Do yourself a favor and make sure that you have the appropriate flathead screwdriver for working on those, because there has been a lot of damage done on mandolins where screwdrivers slip off of flathead screws. The one the one from StuMac with the
catcher,
where it was captured on there. That's pretty good. That works for a lot of them. There's some of them it's not quite right for, but it works on quite a few of them pretty well. So let's see. I'll protect that top. Some leather. Got some wedges here. So you kind of you've got 2 pins going into the board. So you kind of just start pulling it straight out, and then see if you can rock it a little bit back and forth. Once you get it out a little bit, you can take and stuff a little wedge down in there. And then get the other side out, and then you can just keep going back and forth like that. Especially the Gibsons, like from the teens, they can be pretty tough to get out. They kind of corrode, and their nails a lot of times, like if the pick guard is gassing off, it'll rust the nails, and then they really get pretty stuck in there.
So even on
I'm just using like some little wooden wedges, and I'm using things that are softer. They're fairly soft woods, so that nothing gets marred there. So that's how that comes off. You just got those two pins.
And that's still the state of the art in terms of pickguard attachment.
Well, it works, It works, and it works pretty well.
Yeah.
There's some people that do like a little, kind of like a little micro threaded insert, or like an Allen screw.
Mm-hmm. What about magnets? Anybody using magnets?
No. Some people add like a little extra piece underneath it so that it will justify off of the bottom of it. A lot of them, it's like part of the trick is, I don't know if you can see here. Like a lot of the ends, I don't know if, let's see.
Were you trying to point that at the, okay, there we go.
See how like a lot of the ends of fretboards are scooped these days.
Yeah.
So you can get into the sweet spot there. And so if you're building that way, you want that pick guard to be in line with the bottom of the scoop, and so it's got to sit a little bit lower. So the pins are going to be going into the extension underneath it. You got to be careful in that area, because sometimes those pins wind up right in the glue joint between the fretboard and the extension, and so it's pretty easy to pop loose the end of a fretboard if you're not careful in that area. So if they're fitting too tight, you can blow that glue joint.
So you've got the pick guard in line with the scoop. Are players digging in that far that they're getting?
Yes,
they are. All right.
Yes.
Wow.
There's not very many players that make use really of those last few frets there anyways.
Yeah. Well, they all kind of blur together. It kind of becomes more of a fretless proposition up there anyway, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's kind of just some kind of high lonesome tinkling up there. It's hard to make out the note exactly.
I know it's an awful lot of fun to fret up there too.
So this one, The nut slots were a little bit low on this one. Mandolin nut slots are very critical to the setup, and they have to be low. They have to be very low. Like right, which is why mother of pearl is used predominantly on mandolin nuts. It's just harder. In order for it to play well, it's really got to be cut down just right down as close as you can get it. And so this one has got a bone nut, and so it does what almost all of the bone nuts do, which is you cut it where you want it, and then it over time it just sort of cuts itself a new little extra thousandth or two down deeper. They're a lot, it's a lot higher tension than a guitar, and so it's those strings dig into bone a lot more than they do into pearl. So that's kind of something that I let people know too, is like if you're trying to get it as low as you can and you cut a bone nut down to the bare minimum, it's not that uncommon to see them dig down a little deeper than that, so they can go from being just right to not right at all anymore.
Are we talking about the customer bringing it back in a wake and going, I'm getting buzzing, or is it more like a couple months or a couple string changes?
Yeah, it varies. Some bone's pretty soft. So
don't use that
sometimes it could be before it leaves your bench.
So don't use that super porous chalky nonsense bone.
Yeah, I don't even. I mean, some people really like the sound. I mean, or they think they like the sound of a bone nut, because it is, it's lower density than pearl, so it's got a little bit of warmer sound to it. But that, I mean, I really try to steer people away from that, and into pearl, if possible, or I at least let them know that, hey, if this thing 6 months from now starts buzzing because the slots are too low, let's just be forewarned. That doesn't work very often, but you can try.
Doug wants to know, what percentage of your mandolin setups are you upselling into a new nut, just to deal with some of this kind of nonsense?
Not that often. If it needs one, it needs one. Like if it's already got a great big shim under it, I'm probably not gonna try to re-shim that. I've got my about 10 thousandths is my threshold of shimmage. If it's got to go more than that, then it's just, it'll get a new one. And for shims, I'm just, I'm usually, it's like a plain shaving of like sugar maple underneath it. If someone is real concerned that that's gonna, reduce their overall tone output by any more than 20 to 30 tones, then go ahead and sell them a new nut.
Yeah. It does seem like a lot of tones when you get right down to it. Like, that could be a critical factor in whether or not they become a professional musician or not too, right?
It could be. If anyone here has got experience collecting money from bluegrass musicians, then they probably already know it. They tend to prefer whichever option is more affordable.
So your first instinct when you're like, you need a new nut, is you need a new pearl nut, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Michael Cleveland prefers bone nuts. If Mike Cleveland tells me that he wants a bone nut, he gets the bone nut.
Okay.
Most people.
Is there a difference in charge? Is pearl
no,
bigger?
not really. I mean, the blank is a little more expensive, but no. I mean, you do need to have some good quality nut files.
Are you still rocking the Grobets?
Yes. Yeah, those are or whatever they're called now, Clarendon.
Yeah, Vlarby.
They're what are those called? They're like edge round joint.
Yeah,
joint,
joint,
edge, something like that.
You know,
I get them from Rio Grande. Is where I get them from.
I get them from Auto Fry. The set is like, I think, close to $300. And you know what they're actually for? They're for putting slots and screw heads, I think, and watchmaking. I think I read that somewhere. Used to be able to get them from the 1833 shop.
Yeah, you did.
So this is a plain shaving shim.
That's right.
And you've
This one,
applied.
it doesn't need much. It was just this one was just a kind of a classic case
You
of.
want to talk about your accelerator applicator there for a second? That looked pretty fancy.
This is a syringe needle that I heated up with a heat gun and then rammed down on top of the bottle.
Uh-huh.
I think I just pulled the little straw out of it.
Uh-huh.
It's pretty low tech.
Is it still a sprayer or is it?
Nope.
No.
Nope. It just comes out of there.
Just dribbles out.
It's pretty handy.
Danny, did you bring enough salad for the rest of the class?
What is this I'm putting on here? 6,000. That'll be plenty.
6,000.
That's fairly discreet shim.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna go out on a limb and guess that my daughter is not gonna notice.
Copperhead Road will still be manufactured.
Yeah, absolutely. That should work.
Doug, did I get all your questions?
So
Yep.
while I have this apart, oh, go ahead.
No, I said, yep, you got my questions. Great,
Okay.
thank you.
Danny wants to know what kind of CA you're using there.
This is some Amazon's finest here. Mercury adhesives. Seems to be all right. So while I got this apart here, the tailpiece, that's another very critical element of a mandolin setup. These are, this is the classic Gibson style tailpiece. It's got a layer of cork on there that's been added. That's good. The top of that tailpiece has got another layer of cork, also good. You can use felt, but it has to be green felt. See, that's how Bill's was, green felt.
Did you learn that from working with bluegrass musicians?
Yes. So mandolins get a lot of overtones that develop in between the bridge and the tailpiece. And so as you're playing them, you hit a chord and you can really hear it ringing back there. These tailpieces here are very common. This is like a Bill James tailpiece. Part of something that you really need to check on these, and you see a lot of these around. A lot of times, just from the pressure of people closing these, or they get shut in a case and they get squished down. Over time, this gets bent down. In order for this to work properly, these strings rest on these little O-rings here. There's I don't know if you can see that here. There's O-rings that go in there. So this has to be bent upward at enough angle. Generally, you want to be able to stick a straight edge on there. and have that be riding like over the top of the center of the bridge by about 1/8 of an inch or so at least, maybe even more.
So you want those strings to have downforce on those O-rings so they.
Yes. Yes. If this gets bent down too far, then you've got nothing on there silencing. Unfortunately, a lot of them, these little grommet things here, sometimes you still got to use those because they're just too, even when these tailpieces work correctly, they don't silence overtones as well as I would like them to. Sometimes you also end up adding like a little piece of felt behind the nut. You'll get those. This happens especially on instruments with harder wood. It's like sugar maple. The more the higher pitched it is, like the more resonant it is, the more problems that it has. Old Peanut here doesn't suffer from this too much because it's pretty soft. It absorbs a lot of vibration. On better quality instruments, those overtones can really drive you crazy. And so if I'm still having problems up here, adding a piece of felt behind there, I have like some thick felt that I kind of cut down and just stick under there. You don't want it sticking up so high that it's like pushing the strings up out of the nut slots. You want it so that it's just enough to stay put and to quiet those things down. Also, sometimes too on F5s, you'll get these two strings within a course will rub on each other, and so they can. You get mandolins are they can just drive you nuts with all of the different ways that they can vibrate, all of the different things that can vibrate in them. Whether it can be truss rods vibrating, it can be just like a slightly loose pick guard, it can be the tailpiece, it can be like even like a tuner button, like a loose tuner button can vibrate just like you wouldn't believe, and it can sound like it's coming from inside the instrument. So you can really you can spend a lot of time chasing those things down when they get loose. And so any opportunity that you have to silence things that are happening up here and down here, it's generally to the good. Now, like a little bit of extra overtones in it can sound good, and it kind of depends on the player, but it's especially with like hard sugar maple instruments, they get going and they can come back on themselves and just create their own little feedback loops that can really not sound good.
I forget, were there some people trying to tune the string between the bridge and the tailpiece at one time? For some reason that's bubbling up out of my memory, or is that just nonsense? They were trying to like get the overtones just so they were adding to the cacophony.
That was probably some kind of alcoholic nightmare that you had, like in the middle of the night, where you woke up thinking that someone was asking you to do that.
Oh my God! I need to start.
Explain to them that that's not how it works.
I need to start drinking again. That's all there is to it. So a little archaeology on the headstock there.
That's right.
A little loosen on the end of the nut. Bring that shim
clean it up. Yep. It's pretty hard to It's pretty hard to see a 6,000 shim on the bottom of a nut, especially if you've saturated it in super glue.
Yeah. I don't know. I was as a young fella, pretty anti-shim, and I've definitely, after you work on enough guitars where you're like, hey, that old nut looks kind of cool, like, I don't know. I've gotten more shimmy in my old age.
I think it's a much better option than filling a slot, in my opinion. Filling a slot, in my opinion, is just begging for it to fall out at the worst possible time.
Doug, he was using a maple plane shaving.
I've got this. I'm just kind of cleaning some of the grime here off a little bit. This is mineral oil with thinned down with a little bit of turpentine.
Turpentine.
Yep. It's a high quality turpentine. I get it. It's like what's it called?
You got to be careful on the finish with that, or
Not with turpentine, no.
No. All right.
It smells wonderful. It smells like fresh pine stuff. Yeah, it's delicious. People on Amazon drink this stuff to try to kill tapeworms.
Huh.
Believe it or not. I don't think I would do that.
In the Amazon or on Amazon?
On Amazon.
Okay.
People, even though it says explicitly not to take it internally, people still do that.
That sounds like people.
You can learn a lot from Amazon reviews.
I drank it. Nothing happened to me.
It's actually people in the South actually that was the way it was done.
Well,
a lot of people did it. That was a full cure for tapeworms.
There's that remember Bad Livers? They had that song Turpentine Willie.
Mm-hmm.
Although that was apparently written about when they moved to Austin and they ran into some guy that was wandering the streets that had gold paint all over his face.
Turpentine safe on finishes.
Okay.
And it's good. It helps that mineral oil penetrate a little more, and it thins it out. When I glue nuts in, I've just got a little tiny dab or two of Titebond.
Look at this.
Too much. It's a great use of Titebond.
Not non-erosive.
And I don't put it underneath. I prefer to put it just on the face of the fretboard end, the end grain.
Mm-hmm.
Just enough that it doesn't go flying off. On a Gibson style tailpiece, they have all these little extra hooky doos on here. And I wondered for a long time what the point of those things were. And Steve Gilchrist solved the mystery for me, which was in the early days of mandolins, the E and the A strings were sold in bulk on spools, and you tied your own loop in it. And if you put it straight onto the hook, it had a habit of coming loose and undoing itself. And so they added that second loop to take tension off of that and help them stay in tune.
Cool. You still use the superfluous hooks, or?
I do not. They don't help at all. I don't think. I think that they don't stay in tune as well, and they make it a little bit more likely that you'll break a string right there. So I just go straight to the hook.
Danny,
that's got to be worth the price of your monthly Patreon alone, right there.
You don't have to use the extra thing. I think I've always used the extra hook. And I'm not the kind of guy to do something extra for no reason either.
Sometime you'll be in a round of luthier trivia, and that question will come up, and you'll blow people's minds. I'm going to clean this bridge up just a little bit.
More turpentine?
Just a little steel wool. You can hit these, like sometimes a little wax, a little bit of oil can be good on the bridge. Well, I got this part here. These, the posts, one of the first things I'm looking at when I'm looking at a setup here is quite often you'll see the bridge and it's leaning forward a little bit. So it's got a little forward tilt to it. That's really bad for a mandolin when it just needs, and which it's natural that it does that. You know, you put strings on it over time, it wants to lean forward like that. As soon as it leans forward just a little tiny bit, you've then taken the pressure and redistributed it where it, you know, if it's fit correctly, that all that pressure is evenly distributed throughout the foot, and you've then concentrated it to the front inside corners. And so you can see a lot of instruments that they get real sinky right there. They get a pinch to them right there. They'll, you know, the top will pooch up in that spot. So if you see a bridge that's leaning forward, you know, you bend it back. Sometimes the entire bridge is leaning. Sometimes the holes for the saddle are drilled out so wide that the saddle is just leaning forward. In which case, if that's really a problem, then I'm probably replacing the saddle. Sometimes the posts in the bridge are just barely. Sometimes the posts are just barely seated into the base, and if that's, you know, these are in most cases, you know, like on Gibsons, it's still it's a 540, and it's they just took a machine screw and screwed it in there and then clipped it off. These are like a cup heads, Allen head cup screw, I think they call them, something like that. You can get them from McMaster Carr. You can get them. Most of them are 5/8 of an inch. You can get them in 3/4 of an inch. Especially if you got a bridge that's really tall, and it's got a short post. A lot of times, like the bridge will just barely be captured on top of that, so it's got nothing holding it straight. So I pretty regularly end up replacing these bridge posts along with it. And a lot of times all they need is just to be sunk a little bit deeper. So you can just stick an Allen wrench in there and turn them in a little bit more. Sometimes you need to replace them altogether. There's a few of them out there that are, I believe for a while, some of the posts that StuMac sold were metric. So those are, they're like a M, like 0.6 by something or something. I'd have to go look, see what they are, but I've got a box of those somewhere.
So Hugh, you're saying that
let me go get them. I'll show you.
So Hugh, just to clarify, if you had a saddle that was just sitting, kind of rocking on top of those the thumb wheels, you would put a longer Allen.
Yes.
A longer.
Yes, and like I said, sometimes those, like the bridge top will bind up, and so people will drill those holes out a little bit wider, and so then they can just get, those holes can get overboard, and they can get real loose like that. But yeah, sometimes the post is just barely sunk down into the base, and the entire post is leaning forward. And so usually, I mean, you can put a little bit of super glue in there. Sometimes you can do a wood repair to that if you need to. But then it really helps to drive a new post in there that's deeper. So a cut point socket set screw, 540 by 3/4. That's what I end up replacing them with quite a bit. If they're too long, you can clip them off and sand them. The metric ones, occasionally, that you will run into, there's some eras of Gilchrist mandolin that use M3.5 by 0.6.
When you get in a new bridge, like a modern bridge, are they actually using like a tap and putting proper threads in there? Or are they just forcing it and forcing the?
I do that. I tap them. I mean, I make all my bridges. But a lot of times, no, they just drill the hole and then force it in there, which is okay if it's appropriately sized. It can cut its own threads to a degree, but it's pretty common to see where those screws are just barely sunk down into the top of the bridge base, and if that is the case, then that usually causes a problem. So that's a McMaster car item. You can get them in black oxide or stainless. I do quite a bit of replacing those. Usually, like I said, it's pretty obvious like where the bridge is supposed to go. There's usually a pretty good outline. If you were concerned about it, you could mark it.
Peanut. Who's Mr. Haney playing for these days?
Whoever Music Row tells him to.
He played in Alison Krauss's band for a while, didn't he?
No, I don't know.
What am I thinking of?
He played in the Time Jumpers for quite a while. But if you happen to be listening to country radio and you ever hear mandolin and it doesn't sound terrible, then that's probably him that's playing it.
He's the guy, huh?
He's the guy.
Like in the 70s when everything had a banjo every once in a while. Who do you think that was? That was probably Herb Peterson, I would think. Or one of the Dillards. So G's and E's first.
Yeah, it helps to balance it out. They can kind of want to skate around from side to side.
Evan's got to go do something. He says thank you.
But gotta run.
Okay.
Thanks, guys.
Kind of sounded like you had to turn into a robot, but.
If anybody out there's in the 3D printing world and they want to make a good mandolin string winder,
yeah,
the world could use those.
Would you want it to chuck up in the Ryobi still, or?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I do not get paid enough money to turn these things by hand.
Does seem like a lot of turning. You got a preferred amount of wraps on the post there? Like a lot?
On these wound strings, I run the end through there. I put the top wrap over, and then I like to have 2 wraps go underneath it, so it's pinching the end as it goes down. And then on the plain strings, I do the old Martin wrap.
You do? Wow, I thought you were against the Martin wrap.
No, I don't like it on the wound strings. On plain strings though, boy, these mandolins are pretty slippery.
Why don't you give us a tutorial on the Martin Raptor on the next one?
It's also a way that I get back at my customers if they're trying to change their own string.
That's good. Doesn't it also, in fact, get back at yourself though? Or do you have a good way to go about it?
Yeah, if you know the secret stuff, I don't think they're difficult at all to get off. It's just going through the hole, giving myself a couple fingers of slack there. You pull it back underneath itself, bend it over the top. And then on these, all the windings go downward. Yeah. Dead battery. That's how you know it's authentic Ryobi.
Look at this, turning it by hand.
Oh, it's the worst.
Ted Bergstrand comments, Cryobi, more like it. I added the
You
more
see,
like
you
it
see
part.
this modification here I have to keep the end cap on. It's pretty good. It's a rubber band. All right, so I'm kind of looking here. That bridge, when you put the strings on like that, it does have a tendency to give it kind of a northward lean. So
Is that just the friction of the strings and the tension just kind of?
yeah. So I just grab a hold of it like that. Make sure you've properly trimmed your thumbnails before you do this, but just grab a hold of it like that. And usually you can hear a little pop as it comes back into place like that. So I'm just kind of bending it backwards, and you can feel it seat down. Likewise, if I'm going to move the bridge around for intonation, I usually do that under full tension. It's usually pretty easy to do.
Mike is wondering, what about ebony for the nut?
If you like replacing your nut, then go ahead and do that. So actually, that would be a no. It's just too soft.
Too soft. Hugh, where'd you pick up the parrot vice thing? Did you pick that up at Red Wing, or? I know Frank has, like, all the benches at Griffin have a parrot vice on the end of them.
I think.
Did you just see it and you thought that looks like a cool thing?
No, I saw that and I said that only cost half as much as this 2 Mac vice. And I think that was purchased from Grizzly, maybe even.
Really?
Yep. It mostly gets used for holding other vices. No, it's got, I don't know, a pound on it. It serves its purpose.
Yeah.
All right, so looks like it could use just a little bit of tightening. Let's see here. This little hash pipe looking thing here is my truss rod wrench. If you can see the modification on there, The back part of that is ground off, so that you can access nuts a lot easier that way. That's a pretty good modification to do. It's getting down there.
Such a short neck that's it can take a lot of turning, huh?
I can. All right, so that's about I got about 4 thousandths on the bass side and about 5, maybe 6 on the treble side. I'm probably gonna stop there. And that. Just set that bridge height. Whenever when I'm measuring the bridge height, I'm always fretting at the first fret. I don't really want to be measuring the nut in combination with that. You can measure everything together, like once your nut slots are cut the way that you want, but I always measure the bridge height by excluding the nut from that. So I'm gonna hold that down. I don't know why, but I measure mandolin string height in metric, so I apologize to everyone. What a number that's going to make a lot of people happy is going to be just a little bit under 1.5 millimeters on the bass side, and then just ever so slightly lower than that on the treble side. They're pretty close. The bass and the treble side are pretty close. If we were going to translate that to standard, you know, you could substitute a 16th for 1.5 millimeters, but you want to be below that a little bit. So some people can get it down, you know, till I get, you know, like 1.25 millimeters, so about roughly 50 thousandths or so. Some people can take it, and it depends on the instrument too. I mean, some people, like the people that can handle the lowest action height that I know of and still pull off it, you know, having it sound halfway decent, or, you know, 1 millimeter. That's so about 40 thousandths roughly. Below that, I would not expect to be buzz free at all. And at 1 millimeter, it really takes the right instrument and the right player in order to pull that off. But so somewhere in between 1 1/4 and 1.5 millimeters is a good height to be. So I'm a little bit low there. Now, if the bridge is cooperative and you've got big meaty hands, like you can raise those, you can lower them. What commonly I'll do is the Stumac tool here for Les Paul bridge raising and lowering. If anyone has that, I don't know if they still make that or not, but if you don't have that, like a really big flathead screwdriver can work. You can put it under there and just raise up a little bit, take some of the tension off of there, and then do your adjustment. Sometimes if there's a lot of space in there, you kind of got to you got to stick a little extra piece of wood in there. All right, that's looking pretty good. That can go down just a little bit.
Is there ever what you consider too much space between the saddle and the top of the bridge?
Yeah, if it's cranked up too high, that's really hard to keep a bridge standing straight up if it's cranked up too high. So that usually means making a new bridge
to add material to the base, right?
Yeah, and that's a major reason that I make my own bridges is you know, if you have that capability, you can even if the neck angle is pretty screwed up, whether it's high or whether it's low or whether it's tilted from one side to the other, you can make a bridge that looks like somebody did it on purpose, and it's a good thing.
So is this going away to college? This
No.
instrument? No.
All right, that's looking pretty good. Now you can also, this one is pretty much correct, but you can measure all the way across and make sure that the strings are even, like within the course. Sometimes they get bound up in the bridge. Sometimes those get stuck, so sometimes you gotta take a little nut file to them, or take a piece of sandpaper and clean them out. Like if you're pulling the string in and out of that and it's making a pop, then your string is probably getting hung up in there. These are in pretty good shape, but that's something to keep an eye for. I'm usually I'll take like a little needle file, either a round one or a triangle file, and kind of open up the back side of those bridge slots, so that it's kind of makes a smooth transition over the back of it.
What about those saddles ever dip, like Les Paul bridge or anything like that, or?
Not very often.
Yeah.
They sometimes they'll sometimes lower bridges will do that a little bit. Sometimes they get kind of cut out. If the wings get cut out a little bit too much, they can get pretty saggy. If that's the case, I would replace it. There's not really anything you can do for that. You can keep readjusting the slots and everything, but if it's that weak, it's not gonna stay for very long.
Yeah. How sensitive are your adjustments to pitch of the instruments? Like, are you having to make sure that it's at 100% at pitch when you remeasure? Will like a little bit of pitch difference change the action?
It depends on the instrument. If it is one of those real springy ones, like I was talking about,
Yeah.
then that it can matter. Most of the time, it does not matter that much. So I do my nut slots by holding down at the third fret, and then looking at the gap in between the string and the top of the first fret. And you're wanting that gap to be about as close to nothing as it can be, with there still being something. At least on the E string and the A string, you want a little bit more on the D, and then a little bit more on the G. So you want to be able to hit that G string pretty decent without that rattling. So that's gonna, you're probably gonna need 4/1000 or so on that one, maybe even a little bit more. If you get it, part of the reason why the height of the strings at the nut is so important on a mandolin is because it's so high tension as you're playing. When you're fretting in first position, you'll pull the strings sharp, and if the slots aren't exactly the same on the strings within the course, you can have one string that is out of tune with the other, because the difference in the amount that you're pushing it down is enough to change the pitch on it. So that can be a real problem. So those, especially the E and the A, really have to be cut down close.
So more than just being the right action, they've got to be on the money with each other.
They do, or you'll have intonation problems.
I wonder if there's any wisdom on that on 12-string guitars. Like, God, that just seems like impossible to track on ones that aren't choruses. Or I mean, I guess
I'm gonna go ahead and put you in charge of figuring that out. Ian.
Yeah. Plug that into the quadratic equation. See what you get. Plus or minus the square root of A flat.
This A style mandolin's got a little bonus here of that this headstock is a little wider than it needs to be, so the outside strings are really pushing sideways, which is kind of a pain.
So you don't use the nut lifter from StewMac. You're just getting those out with your fingers.
That's right.
Those must be some tough fingers. I bet the guys in jiu-jitsu love that. Like,
well, you gotta be pretty tough to play the mandolin. I do like to use some of this cutting lube, like that you would use on a pearl saw on my nut files, especially if you're working on pearl.
cutting lube. I don't know if what's a cutting lube?
I don't know. All the writing is worn off of it. This is pretty much like a lifetime supply, but I don't know. I think StewMac sold it. Maybe LMI sold it. It's just like for cutting pearl, you just drag your blade through it. I mean, it's some kind of wax is all it is, I think. But
Ted says Dynaglide works well too. I don't know if you know Dynaglide either. Dang it, am I learning stuff? This is ridiculous.
a lot of times on the back side of these nut slots, I like to take a slightly larger nut file. Like I'm using an 11 here, I'm going up to a 13, and I'm just working the very back of that, just kind of flaring the back side of that nut slot out. Especially if you've got some sideways pressure on there, it kind of helps to relieve that so that it's not making a too sharp of a turn all at once. Mandolin nut slot cutting can really test you. So these are about the right height. I just got to make sure that they sound right. That's really common, especially as these things start to dig in a little bit, to start hearing kind of weird sounds come out, you know, from the open strings.
You get many wolf tones with mandolins? You
sure can. Yeah, you definitely can. Like I said, old Peanut here is pretty absorbent of vibration, so not a problem on this one, but better quality instruments sure do.
Well,
sometimes at the very end.
Oh, go ahead.
Sometimes at the very end, I've got a bunch of feeler gauges here that I've taken. I've rounded the edges off on the sander, and sometimes the final step is just burnishing the slot with a rounded feeler gauge. Every once in a while, you can really pull off that one, and it seems like a magic trick, like where it's just got just some really funky sound going on, and you just burnish the slot a little tiny bit, and then it goes away.
You switched to the grow base style nut files when we were at Gruen's, and you said there was something with the original StewMac slotting files that that was the culprit, and how you'd have like your slots just fine, and then you go buff your nut, bring it back, and everything would be completely changed from buffing. Do you remember what that was?
As near as I could tell, like they almost had like little like facets to them.
Yeah.
It wasn't perfectly round. It's like almost like a, like half of a hexagon or an octagon or something like that. And so like those little facets were kind of creating edges, and you get it down as deep as you want. And then I just had so many problems of those just going deeper than I wanted by just like the slightest little bit of sanding. Yeah. So sometimes I'll take a little piece of sandpaper and wrap it around a feeler gauge, or wrap it around a razor blade, and kind of clean the junk out of the slots, and open it up just a little tiny bit. Mm-hmm. A lot of times that can make all the difference between something that sounds right and doesn't sound right. My eyeballs are still functional for this type of work, but they're starting to fuzz up a little bit on me.
Oh my God, it's such crap. I'd be in the optivisors for this right now, by the way, with probably a pair of glasses underneath the optivisors.
I'm gonna call this really about 2/1000 here clearance. I might even go less than that on a pearl nut. But I know this one's gonna dig in a little bit on me, so I'm kind of just giving myself just a little bit extra.
Anything even more exotic than pearl? Do people take it up a notch in material?
Nope, they've figured out the correct way to do this over 100 years ago, and people are still trying to figure out a better way, but I don't think there is one.
Pearl nuts.
Pearl can be pretty frustrating, though. I mean, it can vary a lot from piece to piece.
Well, it's a little flaky too. Like, could you get a flake?
Shouldn't be
a flake out in the center of your nut slot or something? Or?
That doesn't happen very often, but it can happen. But it's not common.
You ever make you a pearl guitar nut?
Yeah.
Is it pretty fancy?
Yeah, it is pretty fancy. I think I made one for like a lower era L5. I think those came with pearl nuts.
Really? Get your little leather back up in there.
Yeah. Even Peanut deserves a little bit of love.
How long have you had those Grobet? Is that the only set of Grobets that you've ever owned, or have you replaced them?
No, I've replaced them a couple times.
Yeah.
I think they're good for about 100 pearl nuts. Like the Stumac gauged ones, those are good for about maybe 5 pearl nuts. Sometimes I have been known to just like snap the tip off of it, because that's usually where all the wear is. Sometimes too, I have been known to sharpen them by soaking them in vinegar.
Oh yeah.
That actually works better than you can sharpen your regular files like that too.
Any
you got to get them really clean, get all the little bits of everything out of there, degrease them with some acetone, and then I just soak them overnight in a Ziploc bag with vinegar. Pull them out, wash them in hot water, put them in a toaster oven, drive all the moisture off, and then give them a little bit of oil. And it works remarkably well. I've had files that I was gonna throw away because they had gotten so dull, and just brought them back. Kind of want to do a bunch of them at once, though.
What's the? Is there a special? You like the apple vinegar or anything?
Just regular old vinegar, white vinegar.
White vinegar. Nothing artisanal.
You might taste a little better if you used apple cider, but I don't think the results would be different.
So what's going on? Is the acid just eating at that
Yeah, it just
knife edge?
Yes, it just eats the metal away.
Do you wind up with a different coarseness or something out of the deal, or is it roughly the same coarseness as when you started?
Pretty close to the same.
That's just amazing.
I'm hearing some unpleasant sounds coming out of this E string here, so I'm gonna work on this a little bit.
You got a zing or what?
Yeah, it's hard to tell. I got these earbuds in, so I can't hear it all that well, but I should probably take these out for just a second so I can hear this. It's a little bit of a pop when I'm pulling them out. So I'm gonna just try to work the kind of the top of this, opening it slightly up with a 13 instead of an 11. Let's see. A little razor blade and sandpaper action.
You ever put handles on your nut files?
Nope.
Thinking about 3D printing up some.
Hey, that's better. All right, I'm going to check that intonation here. Got the strobe tuner going. I'm just measuring open and at the 12th fret. Just a little bit sharp there. A little more sharp there. So I'm just gonna grab this thing between my knees here and just kind of get low on the bass. Just grab it securely, move it back, make sure that you're leaned back appropriately.
Is it? I remember it was at one point people were putting back angles on their bridge fits. Is that still a thing?
When I make a bridge, I like to add at least a half a degree, usually somewhere between a half a degree and 1 degree of back angle on it. That helps resist that forward lean of it. It helps to bisect the angle better. That's looking pretty good. So the A is a little bit flat on here. The E is in tune, the A is flat. So on this bridge, the compensation for this A string is cut a little bit further back than it should be, but without making a new bridge for it, there's nothing that you can do about that really. So if you have to choose one way or the other, put the E string on pitch and have the A be a little flat.
Yeah.
If you make the A in tune and the E a little bit sharp, that will flat sounds a lot better than sharp when the intonation is off. Same goes if you've got to split the difference between the G and the D, just always go on the side of flat rather than sharp. Kick that back just a hair more. That's pretty good.
That sounds in tune.
Yeah, another week or two, it should actually be in tune.
Well, right before it's ready for a string change.
So if you can, I don't know if you can hear this from here or not, but I don't have the tailpiece cover on here. You can really hear these.
Yeah,
so with this too, a lot of time on these Gibson tailpiece covers, a lot of times too, the tip of this will start writing into these strings here. So just put them in your old Stumac vise. Give them just a little bit of a upward bend on the tip of that, and that should take care of that. So you want to make sure that you're getting that when that goes on there, that you're getting those overtones killed. Get on there. That's coming from the behind the nut. If you want, we could. This is fine to play if we've got a fussy customer on our hands here, or just anyone with a discerning ear, and we wanted to shut that thing up. This is some pretty thick felt. How thick is this? 1/8 inch thick. I would take a sharp knife.
See, a lot of times guys will have like kind of like a strip of leather tied off up there too, like that doesn't seem like
people put the strip of leather down here.
Yeah.
Mike Compton is the
he's the strip of leather guy.
I call it the Compton weave. The special little way that he does it, and it actually works pretty well.
What about rattlesnake rattles? Is he a rattlesnake rattle kind of guy?
I remove those from people's mandolin at no charge.
All
right, so that's a little thicker than it needs to be. I'm going to cut this down just a hair.
What's the story on those? Were they supposed to be like a desiccant or something, or?
I've heard that people did that so that like it would help, like it balled the dust up. I don't know what difference that makes, but I don't know. I think it's just some good old fashioned bluegrass mojo lore.
Well, I think it started in violins, maybe.
Did
I
it?
know. Well, I've seen rattlesnake rattles and fiddles before, but I don't know. Danny says it's supposed to be a mice deterrent.
Mice, huh?
Did you hear that, Danny? Or you just?
Oh, it's a real thing.
It's a real thing. They smell it and they're like, "Oh shit, a snake."
Yeah.
Is that a big problem with mice getting inside the instruments?
That's the thing that I've heard. I don't know. There's many excuses why people put shit in their instruments.
Well, I do think that Bill Monroe did it. So you need not look much farther than that for a explanation. All right. If we were smart, we would have done this before we put the strings on, but I'm just gonna move those out of the way. If you really wanted to get fancy, you can put some black magic marker on here. Kind of hides it off a little bit. And it's still just a little bit fatter than I want. I think this is some real beaver. There's lots of little beaver hairs in here.
Beaver felt.
Here, we'll go ahead and give this the full Jethro Bodine treatment here.
Is that a regulation Sharpie or is that a it looks
This
fancier.
is a low VOC Sharpie, so it will not get you high.
Huh.
I couldn't find any black felt that was an 1/8 of an inch thick, so that's why I got this gray stuff. I'm sure it's out there. This is a one place on the mandolin where you don't use green felt.
What about cork? Would you ever use a cork back there?
It's not quite resilient enough.
Yeah.
Like if it's just a little too thick up here, it'll push the strings up out of the nut slot and you'll get some problems from that. So you're wanting this to just barely set on there. Just enough to kill those nasty little sounds. It looks like it'll be just about right. So it holds itself in place. That's kind of what you want, is for that to stay put of its own accord. Take these earbuds out so I can hear it.
What brand earbuds are those?
Better.
Yeah,
I don't know if you guys can hear that, but
I can hear that.
that is at least 10% less offensive.
Yeah, you had some zing in there. I hear the zing be gone.
All right. Like that about.
Have you ever had a customer bring in an instrument without a truss rod cover and you forgot to denote it, and then you spent a lot of time looking for the truss rod cover when you're done with the project?
No, there's some people that collect other people's truss rod covers though.
I'm not saying there weren't a couple floating around on a bench at Bruins every once in a while, like, oh boy, probably should have put that back on.
All right. Well, if anybody's got any questions, that's
Anybody got any questions?
of info there.
That is a ton of info, and there's a lot of stuff in there, just so everybody knows. I know of probably 10 things in there that probably took a guy an entire career to suss out as to potential problems. And Hugh, what was the one of those that was like you like were banging your head against the wall until it occurred to you that was the spot?
I did like a whole batch of A-style mandolins, and that I built, and I put golden age tuners on them, and the buttons are just like the press fit buttons, and I just kept having these like weird rattles in these instruments that were like just sounded like they were coming from the bowels of hell, and for the life of me, I could not figure it out. And when I did finally figure it out, like the tuner buttons on those tuners were just ever so slightly loose, and you'd have to get to playing the mandolin. You'd have to like really get it warmed up and playing it for a while, and really get everything vibrating, and then they would just start to rattling up, and it would transmit through the neck and through the headstock and the neck and into the body, and so it would really sound like it was coming from the body because it's vibrating along with it. And pulled the buttons off, cleaned them up, put epoxy in there, put them back on. Problem gone.
Getting back to that conversation you were having with Doug there for a second, though, it's almost never the body, right? Like it's almost never the tone bars. It's almost never.
I've seen it before, but it's rare. It's very rare.
Yeah.
On an F hole, like I said, on an oval hole, those lateral braces come loose all the time.
Mm.
It's pretty rare that either tone bar or X braces come loose.
Yeah. Any questions before we let Hugh go? Let Hugh go. It's not your name. Well, everybody that's here, unmute and say thanks. And Hugh, like, dude, this was really good. Like I've got like a bunch of actionable items from this rendezvous here. This is really good. A lot of deep Tinkler information I was not privy to. So I really appreciate it.
Nobody can say that I didn't warn them first. Setting up mandolins, but hopefully that was helpful. I'm glad it was useful for people, but glad to be here.
You got a thanks from, I believe, Dan Earlywine there. So
all right,
that's coming in. All right, everybody say unmute and say thanks. Thanks, Hugh.
Thank
you.
Come again.
Thanks, you.
That was illuminating.